These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs.
Tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you for joining us today here on Market Journal. Planting is starting to wind down for some of our viewers today, with the U.S. Department of Agriculture reporting to start the week the Nebraska ag producers were well ahead of their typical planting schedule. Coming up on today's show, we'll be heading out west to see how a team at the West Central Research, Extension, and Education Center is helping pea producers improve their yields. Jeff Peterson will join the broadcast a little bit later for this week's market analysis. And as always, Eric Hunt, he's standing by with a check of weather, including a recap of some much-needed rain that finally fell across portions of Nebraska this week. That's all coming up, but first, let's start with an update for cattle producers. This week, Market Journal's Bill Dodd caught up with a Nebraska Extension beef educator to talk about the ongoing drought situation that's hitting pretty much all parts of Nebraska. With pastures struggling for moisture, Aaron shares an alternative to grazing that could help producers preserve their forage and stretch resources throughout this dry spell.
As drought conditions continue to persist in the Nebraska Panhandle region and grazing land continues to dry down, pastures would greatly benefit from delaying turnout, as the cool season grasses that are present have had very limited growth.
So when we delay turnout on pasture, what it allows us to do is allow any moisture we do have for those grass plants to fully grow and utilize what they do have. And there's a rule of thumb that proportional growth, if you look at top growth, that's proportional to growth below the surface. So every bit of moisture we've got, if we can let that plant access it and grow, that's going to provide additional forage later in the season. Also, of course, when we have warm, windy conditions, any plant growth that's there helps to shade the ground. It also captures any moisture we do get more effectively and holds it. So there's kind of a snowball effect, so to speak, in terms of being able to delay turnout, let that grass grow without being grazed, let it capture whatever moisture you do get, and then hopefully get as much as you can when you want to try to go out later in the growing season. So as we think about the Panhandle, Nebraska, we've been in a drought for a long time. We were hoping to get some precip this spring. That just really hasn't materialized. And so pastures, in many cases, they've tried to green up, but they're really not growing. Some folks have turned cattle out, but there's really not any new grass growth or very limited grass growth out there. We've got some scenarios where folks who have integrated crop livestock operations also may have some wheat. And unfortunately, wheat prices are not very good. We're looking at $4.25 to $4.50 currently right now for bids for new crop wheat for July and much of the Panhandle. So when you look at the situation we're in today, where cattle have a lot of value for feeder cattle, calves, cows, and then we look at a short forage crop in terms of pasture, there may be scenarios where grazing out some of this wheat that normally would go to grain could provide some alternative as a place to go with some cows currently, especially cows that have calves outside that have calved early. They're getting ready to breed. Quality forage is important for those cows as they go into the breeding season. For later calving folks, being able to get those cows that will be calving out on some of that wheat now, again, a high quality forage for them to calve on really could be an advantage. So I guess I just see, everyone's scenario is different, but really looking at this wheat crop as a potential forage resource may have a lot of value this year under the current economic conditions we're in and the drought scenario we're dealing with in the Panhandle.
If you're trying to hold off on grazing pastures and grazing wheat isn't an option for you, there are some alternatives producers can turn to in order to ensure the nutritional requirements of their herd continue to be met.
Yeah, so I think right now folks are looking at dry lining cows, and that's kind of the scenario. This drought's pretty widespread, so finding pasture is probably not really much of an option. So already having calls of folks looking at dry lining cows, and so that's getting creative. We're fortunate in Nebraska, ethanol co-products are readily available right now. And so depending on what you have access to, mixing that with some low quality forage, putting together a ration that has adequate vitamins and minerals to meet the needs of those cows and that calf is going to be really important. For folks who maybe don't have a mixer wagon or a feed truck, limit feeding some cows using dry distiller's grains and a bunk and some hay could be an option as well. So it's just going to really depend on your scenario and what you have access to, what you're willing to do. Many folks are going to try to hold on to the cow herd because, again, the calf prices are exceptionally good, and they're going to be looking at that as an option. There's scenarios where the bottom end of the herd maybe needs to go ahead and be sold as a way to reduce stocking rates and just to move those cattle down the road, get some cash in hand to provide some options to hold on to a core breeding herd as we move through the summer and get to this fall.
Given the current market prices, wheat may be a great alternative to grazing grasslands. However, there are a few things you should be mindful of to ensure the health and well-being of those cattle.
Yeah, I think one of the things in turning out on wheat is just recognizing that sometimes we can have some grass tetany issues, and so they're a high mag mineral. Consistent consumption of that mineral is important. That's one of the things that could be a potential issue, probably a little less with the drought scenario we're in. Frequently, that's more of a problem when we have really lush, wet conditions, but still something that would be prudent to have be part of the feeding plan if you're going to turn cattle out on wheat and plan to graze it out. Well, I think folks, as they deal with just this drought, and especially across the state, as they're looking at what are my options, what do I think about doing, utilize the resources of the University of Nebraska Extension. Specialist educators can help them think about rations, help them thinking about feed resources, and consider their options to make the best decision they can for their individual scenario.
For producers considering turning out their cattle on wheat, it will be very important for them to consider how grazing or haying will impact subsequent crop production, insurance, and potential government payments.
Now, reports from around the state currently show that some ranchers have already delayed their summer pasture turnout due to those dry conditions. If you'd like to dig a little bit deeper into this topic, we invite you to head over to the Beef Watch website. It's beefwatch.unl.edu for more information and management tips. You might remember on last week's show, we went one-on-one with the president of Reinke Manufacturing and Deshler and took you behind the scenes of their brand new robotics line. But our conversation did not stop there. Reinke is also deeply investing in community building and outreach throughout their communities. And on today's show, we're taking a look at how that work is making an impact. How do you find great employees and retain them?
Well, that's always a challenge, isn't it? But you're fortunate to be where we're at. Again, you got good, hardworking kids that are working on the farm a lot of times, and sometimes they want to stay on the farm, which is great. We love farmers, but sometimes they want to do something different. But they want to stay in a smaller area. We've had really good luck trying to find employees. We'll talk about engineers a little bit. We've had good luck trying to find engineers out of the University of Nebraska or out of K-State, because again, when it's happened, a lot of times small town kids are going to those universities, earning their engineering degree, but then they want to go back to the small town. It may not be their hometown, but they want to go back to small town, much like what I did. And so that's how we find those folks. But we go to career fairs. We advertise hard to let people know that we're here, and we're very fortunate, though, to have a good, stable workforce where we're at. We've got over 50 people that have been with us for 25 years or longer.
Oh, that's impressive.
That's very impressive. Those guys, we owe a lot to those folks.
Well, not only do you all invest internally into the company, but also externally into the local communities that you serve. Talk about some of the ways, perhaps childcare or others, that you choose to reinvest in, why that's important.
Childcare, so we started doing this a few years ago in childcare. So the local daycares here, the in-home daycares, a lot of those individuals just starting to get a little older, and they were telling us that they were going to be retiring soon, and so we were getting concerned about that. And so us and Midwest Bank, we partnered with Midwest Bank, and we put a challenge grant together, and we raised money. So we put the challenge grant together, and if the local community could match it, then we donated the money to the childcare. So a brand new building a building was renovated into a brand new building. It had been vacant for several years, and they renovated into a new childcare center. And so it's open, it's being used, and that's fantastic. The other thing that we did is through the child care tax credit that the Nebraska legislature had put forth a couple years ago, we donated to every child care center and daycare in Thayer County. And the reason why we do that is because I would be willing to bet that every one of those child care centers or daycares has one of our employees' kids in it. And so it's important to us to be able to provide quality child care to those, to our employees. And so it's just an important thing for us to be able to provide, or else it creates hardships for our employees. Some of the other things that we do is we're very active in the schools in the area. So 15 years ago or so, Bryce, we started a welding program at Deshler High. And so what we do is we help them get welding equipment. They allowed us to drive their curriculum. So it's all around the American Welding Society. So we've been doing it for 15 years or so. Kids are going to school there. They're learning how to weld. They can come out here and work right away. They can get themselves certified in welding, and they can come to work for us right away. We send up one of our employees in to teach that class. So the school lets us do that. So we go in and teach the class. We also have Thayer Central, which is out of Hebron. They bring kids over and use this facility, and we teach that class. And then we also send an individual over to Superior, and they teach that class over at Superior High School. And so we're doing that every day. Every day of the school year, we're doing that. We also go in and we teach at the junior high level at Deshler Public. We teach hydraulics, we teach electrical, basic electrical, we teach CAD drawing, all those things. And again, those are our individuals going into the schools teaching that. A few years ago, then what we did too is at the Deshler facility where we have all the welding equipment, we started a summer program, because what we were getting is we were getting people that were wanting to take the welding class at the high school level, but they live 30 miles away and they just couldn't get the class schedules to coordinate well enough, because 30 miles away, then they come and take a class for an hour and then 30 miles back. Well, it's 2 hours out of their day and they're missing English or something like that. So what we did is we started a summer program. And so we have like 8 to 10 schools that are sending kids in here during the summertime. It's like a 10-week course, and they take that class. And I just checked on this a couple weeks ago, and we're almost full. So we have almost 16 kids signed up for the summer again. And what we do to incentivize them is, if they go to class and they pass the test, we'll give them like a $500 stipend at the end. It's like a scholarship at the end. If they pass it, then they get the money. So obviously what we're trying to do is we're just trying to create workforce. They may not come to work for us, but the more welders we can get in the area, that's better for us in the long run.
Well, let's stay there with Chris. We appreciate him and the team from Reinke having us out to Deshler to film that segment. Well, up next is our chance to check in on the markets. Joining us on the desk here live in person is Jeff Peterson, the president of Heartland Farm Partners. Good to see you, sir.
You bet. It's great to be here. Beautiful morning.
Yes. Well, we started the week with some reports out from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the WASDE. I made a note here when it comes to soybeans. That's where we'll begin our conversation. USDA lowered ending stocks and raised the seasonal average price, yet exports are projected to fall. I'm curious how you interpret that setup.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because if you look at it, we are bringing down, exports 35 million bushels from what we would have been for the 24 crop. And I think the answer to that really goes, we had to just dig a little deeper into the numbers. So we take a look and we say, let's get to that ending stock number. And the ending stock number came in at 295 million, which was tighter than really the average trade guess and tighter than most analysts were thinking. And that's down from our 350 million in where we look at for the 2024 crop. So then we take that out one step further, Bryce, and we dig in, we take the stocks to use ratio, and we look at that 11.6% stocks to use. And really what it says there is that's what would cause us, because that stocks to use is tighter, that's what's going to physically cause us to say that prices on the marketing average need to be higher, even though we had a reduction on the export side. Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, is the crush is higher. Crush is up 70 million. I think they're pretty close on that. We've got a couple plants that are coming online. AGP David City should be online this fall. You've also got another plant that's going to be run by South Dakota Soybean Processing up there in Mitchell, South Dakota is coming online. Between those two, that's about 96 million. So there's still probably a little bit more room for them to increase crush down the road.
Okay, of course, talking about the soybeans there, let's move over to corn. No surprise here. USDA projected a record crop between acreage and then trend line yield coming in at 15.8 billion bushels for the upcoming growing season. That's bearish news at the surface level, but traders seem hesitant to push the corn market down too far. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. So let's dig into it and look at where we came into the report at, because we know the market's always looking ahead. So what it really kind of did is it kind of discounted the price going into that report already. So we got prices down low enough where we found some good support. So that's when that report came out. But just like what we did on beans, we want to dig into the numbers. And as we get all the way down to that stocks to use ratio, and we get down there and what it's showing us is at about 11.6% stocks to use, when you start using those numbers, that would suggest that we're undervalued on those new crop bushels yet. And down the road, there has to be probably some weather premium that's brought into that. Now, what's really interesting is we dig even deeper into the WASDE report and take a look in particular at some of the world numbers. What isn't getting a lot of discussion is that world demand actually from the 2024 to the 2025 crop is going to go up 962 million bushels. So what that does, and a lot of that, and well, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of that actually is coming out of Brazil. So why that's so important and what's happening in Brazil is we're seeing additional production of ethanol and also some on the feed side, so that's using up additional bushels. So what's good for the U.S. is that does open up the door for us to be able to have additional exports. So unlike soybeans, what we ended up seeing on the corn side is we saw an increase in exports. Now there's a lot of people questioning that number. Yeah. But overall, I still think our old crop export number still has to go up more yet.
Have to have those trading partners in place too, and there's a lot of turmoil on that front, right?
Oh, there definitely is.
To that point, last week we had the announcement, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point, time is flying with the UK, and there was some news about that could be a possible boost to the ethanol market. Do you put a lot of stock in that moving forward?
Well, the thing that we do know is that they did take, I think they were at about an 18% tariff for ethanol going in the UK, and they brought that back to zero. That number in of itself, no, won't do much to move the ethanol market, won't do much to move the corn market. But what it does, it sets a precedent, I think, in what we could see going forward. The precedent that it sets, I think, is the fact that ag can be used in some of these negotiations. Ag can be an item that hopefully, especially on China's side, could be where we could see some additional demand. I think that's the most important piece that came out of that.
But perhaps some volatility when ag is used as one of the poker chips, Jeff. Wheat tour was underway in the state of Kansas. They touched Nebraska and Colorado as well. Anything major come out of that? I know some good prices days 1 and 2 at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Not good prices. I should correct myself. Good yield projections day 1 and 2, Jeff.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. They're seeing some good yields, and they picked up some moisture. Now, granted, just like here in Nebraska, they've got some moisture stress in some pockets, but overall the yields are showing at least better. The wheat streak mosaic virus, is showing up some there, so we'll have to keep an eye close on that, what that's going to end up doing over on the demand side or on the production side. But what I do think is happening there is that we want to watch closely what goes on in the eastern part of Colorado, because that has reported a little bit lower yields, southern parts of Nebraska. But as we've always talked about, wheat is such a world market. I think we've came down and find some nice support in here in the marketplace. And I think ultimately, even though we're going to have some big numbers, I think the thing on production out of Kansas, I think we got to talk about the Oklahoma crop a little bit. Because of the amount of moisture they had down there could be some problems with drowned out. There could also be some problems that you could end up seeing, some additional problems with the wheat quality down there. And we haven't figured and found that out yet.
All right, so we wrap up. What kind of strategy are you looking at this point? Sitting tight for a little bit or making some moves? Yeah,
so sitting here right now today on both the corn and the bean side, we just want to kind of hold tight here. And the reason we're wanting to hold tight is that, the acres are known at this point. Now they could change as we get to the end of June. A lot of unknowns on yield, and we haven't even had a chance to talk anything about what's going on in weather. And in particular, what's really interesting, you take a look at the state of Nebraska, this is the driest we've been on the subsoil and also on the topsoil moisture, going all the way back to 2013 for this time of year. So we want to let weather unfold a little bit yet before we'll be making additional sales.
Good conversation there with Jeff. Appreciate him stopping by the Market Journal set this week. As you know, we like to hear from you, our viewers, in terms of what's on your mind when it comes to not only the grain, but also the livestock markets. So if you have a question for one of our future analysts, go ahead and email us by about Wednesday so we can pass your question along. The Bovie wildfire in 2022 may have destroyed the physical state forage camp at the Nebraska National Forest near Halsey, but the Nebraska Forage Camp experience is still going strong, with camps taking place each summer at sites across Nebraska. And there's more on the horizon. Major efforts are underway to develop a Sandhills Discovery Center in Halsey, a place that would offer residential youth camping and could also serve as a venue for a variety of activities in the forest. That sounds like a neat experience. You can read about this in the May issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time for our weather update with Nebraska Extension Ag climatologist Eric Hunt. Eric, I mentioned at the top of this week's show that some much needed moisture did fall earlier this week in portions of the state. I know a lot of people, though, still waiting for their turn. What are you tracking over the next 7 days?
Well, thanks, Bryce. Some places had tremendous precipitation Wednesday night, but most of us had nothing here for last week, and some of us had nothing for a long time. We are starting to deal with wheat streak mosaic virus across the state, and we are getting that time of year when diseases are pesky. So we do have the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic here in East Campus, 448 Plant Science Halls, where you can mail those samples. Kyle Broderick and his team will take good care of you. In terms of weather, I do think we have some precipitation to talk about here coming up the next several days. Complements of this trough will be moving into the Central Plains early this week, and we should have pretty good moisture return. Right now, it looks like we'll have an area of showers and thunderstorms probably developing across the western portion of the state late Sunday afternoon, early Sunday evening, and building eastward through the evening and overnight hours. And then probably another round of showers and thunderstorms developing in the central and eastern section of the state later in the day on Monday and possibly going into Tuesday. On Monday afternoon and evening, I do think the southeastern quadrant state has a reasonably good chance of picking up severe weather. Large hail will be the biggest threat, but also tornadoes, damaging winds, and possible flash flooding. In terms of precipitation, southwestern Nebraska likely to come out the shortest on moisture. I do think that the Panhandle has a chance of getting some very beneficial moisture if we can get enough wraparound, depending on where that low pressure is. Certainly the eastern half of the state has a good chance of picking up at least an inch. I do think that some of you in central and eastern Nebraska have had diddly squat here for a long time, have a reasonably good chance of picking up about 2 or 3 inches of rain here early this next week. But I will have to see this, believe it, and I'm sure most of you are in the same boat. Temperatures look to be on the cool side most this next week. Sunday, Monday will be relatively warm in central and eastern sections of the state, certainly southeastern Nebraska on Monday. After that cold front goes through the state on Tuesday, I think we'll have about at least a 3 or 4 day stretch of temperatures being generally below normal. Wednesday probably being the coolest day with highs in the 50s across the northern half of the state. Later in the week, originally building back into the western United States, we probably are looking at another shortwave coming over the state and into western Iowa late on Friday into Saturday. Chance of picking up some precipitation, but I don't think we're looking at anything terribly significant and probably not looking at much of a chance of severe weather during that time period either. CPC shows drier conditions favored here in the last portion of May, and I do think that may persist into June, so I think it's absolutely critical that we get moisture here the next 4 or 5 days across the state because it may be a while before we have a chance of picking up this kind of precipitation again. Temperature is looking to be probably a little bit on the cool side to start this period, but I think as we get closer to Memorial Day, we'll be at or above average pretty much statewide. Precipitation was significant here across a portion of the Sandhills Wednesday night and early Thursday, about 5 inches across a portion of southern Cherry County, and some 3 or 4 inch reports from Garfield, Wheeler, and Holt County as well. Also some beneficial precipitation out there in the Panhandle. We did see significant drought degradation across the state based on the lack of precip here in the last several weeks. A lot of the state is now in severe drought. More of the state is now in extreme drought. And we have seen just tremendous amount of potential evapotranspiration across this region of the country the last 9 months. Tepid precip roundup. Back to you, Bryce.
All right, thank you very much for that update, Eric. We do appreciate it. Finally today, field peas, especially yellow field peas, are gaining traction in western Nebraska as a promising alternative to summer fallow. The crop offers several benefits, including improved soil health and better land productivity. Researchers at the West Central Research, Extension, and Education Center in North Platte are hard at work studying different varieties to figure out which ones will give producers the best return.
Usually the most common crop rotation here is corn with fallow, and usually spring peas has been one of the crops to replace that fallow period. We are looking at some new varieties of yellow winter peas. So usually winter peas are more seen as a probably cover crop or more for forage. So those new yellow winter peas are same as the yellow spring peas, but actually plant on the fall, and they overwinter and they come up in the spring. And the advantage should be that they flower a bit earlier and hopefully produce a better yield. So that will give an option to farmers to either plant either in the fall or in the spring and actually probably capture better yields for the peas for the field piece in West Central Nebraska. So we are doing some research in basically planting dates. We already did some, and we screened some varieties. So we already found some that they will survive better the winter in this area. And now we are looking a bit more on more planting depth, plant population. So very basic cultural practices to see if this crop may adapt to the area. So we started first screening some varieties here in North Platte and also in Grant. So we are in the kind of west central area. And then after the second year, we have a producer in the area of Broken Bow that actually tested, a couple acres, and where I think 12 acres, and did some more on farm and could, harvest those winter peas. And we are doing a second year now with him. And there has been some partnership also with one of the seed companies, and there were about 300 acres of irrigated organic peas that were, they are being done actually in Colorado, in eastern part of Colorado. So we are helping a bit with some of the learnings that we have here. They are also trying to apply there for going more on farm on larger scale. Yes, we keep screening varieties. So there are, right now we have 2 that we have seen pretty good, but screening more varieties and seeing more the consistency of those yield and protein, also the quality. I think that's very important for the pea industry as well. Then keep looking at other practices that will improve those pea yield. Could be cultural practices and also fertilization, so more management to improve those yields and consistency, so the farmers can have more options and more stability when they decide to do those field peas. Well, sure, they can, if they are interested in this research or in testing some of these variety with some of the practices that we are seeing, they can contact us here in the West Central Research Extension Education Center in North Platte. They can always email or call, and my contact is in the webpage, West Central Research Extension Education Center webpage. So.
Now, if you have any questions or you have an interest in this project, you're encouraged to reach out to Nicholas directly at the West Central Research Extension Education Center. We'll post that contact information along with this story. Find them both over on the Market Journal homepage. That's about all the time we have for this week's edition of Market Journal. I want to let you know that coming up next week, we'll be sharing some important pest updates that soybean producers will want to keep an eye out for this growing season. We hope to see you back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.